What would you do if a complete stranger sketched the home you thought only existed in your forgotten memories? Lucas Bennett, a self-made architecture CEO known for building cities from steel and glass, lives a life measured in deadlines, boardrooms, and blueprints. He's respected, feared, and envied. But he's also alone, an orphan with no roots, no real past. One rainy afternoon, as Lucas cuts through a city square, he notices a homeless boy quietly sketching beside a newspaper stand. What catches his eye isn't the boy's ragged clothes or calm demeanor, it's the drawing. Because the boy is sketching his childhood home, a house Lucas hasn't seen since he was a child in the orphanage. Shaken, Lucas asks the boy where he learned to draw it. The boy says softly, "My mom said it belonged to her favorite uncle. She used to draw it from memory." Now, everything Lucas thought he knew is unraveling. Who is this boy? Who is his mother? Why does the past Lucas buried decades ago suddenly rise through graphite lines on a sketchpad? As pieces of family long lost to resurface, Lucas must confront the pain he tried to forget, and face a decision that could transform his empire and his heart forever. Don't miss what happens next. Tap, subscribe, and follow this incredible journey of rediscovery, family, and redemption. The November wind whipped through Midtown like it had something to prove, funneling between glass towers and scuttling paper cups across the pavement. Lucas Bennett barely noticed. His leather shoes clicked methodically along the sidewalk, his long coat trailing behind him like a shadow of his ambition. He should have taken the car. His assistant had offered, twice, but Lucas waved her off, saying he needed the walk. Truthfully, he needed the space. Space to think, to breathe, to remember what the hell it was all for. He passed a food truck with its spicy aroma drifting temptingly into the chill and ignored it. A block later, he sidestepped a woman trying to sell imitation perfume from a blanket. All background noise to a man who had trained himself to filter everything except blueprints and bank statements. Lucas was a creator of skylines, a man who didn't just build cities, he reshaped how people lived in them. But, for all his vision, there was one blind spot he could never quite explain, the missing puzzle pieces of his own beginning. He was a Bennett only by adoption. He never knew his birth parents. He'd grown up in the foster system, bouncing between homes until the Bennetts, a kindly couple in Vermont, took him in when he was 12. They gave him structure, discipline, love in their own stoic way, but there were still blank pages before that. No photos, no names, just the lingering, aching absence of a first memory. Lucas sighed and turned toward Columbus Circle, letting himself be swallowed by the lunchtime crowd. His phone buzzed in his coat pocket. He ignored it. Then, just as he passed the corner of 59th and Broadway, he saw something that stopped him mid-step. A boy, maybe 9 or 10, sat cross-legged on a flattened piece of cardboard pressed up against the granite wall of an old bank building. He wasn't panhandling. There was no cup, no sign. Just a large sketchbook on his lap and a bundle of charcoal pencils clutched in his small, ink-smudged hand. Lucas might have kept walking. He saw kids on the street often. New York didn't hide its broken parts. But something about the boy held him. The focused way his eyes tracked the strokes of his pencil, the quiet stillness around him, like he was insulated from the chaos just feet away. And then there was the drawing. Lucas blinked. The boy was sketching a house. Not just any house, but the house. Whitewashed wood siding, black shutters, a worn front step with the left corner chipped just slightly, a swing hanging from a tree with one frayed rope. Lucas hadn't seen that house in over 3 decades. It was the orphanage, the one he vaguely remembered before the Bennetts, before he had a name and a room of his own, the one from his earliest dreams, faded, scattered dreams he'd tried to convince himself weren't real. His chest tightened as he stepped forward, cautiously, like getting too close might shatter the boy's focus, or the fragile illusion of what he was seeing. "Hey," Lucas said gently, voice barely audible over the city's dull roar. The boy looked up, startled but not frightened. He had kind eyes, big, amber-brown ones with long lashes that didn't quite match the grime on his face. His expression was open, unguarded. He looked up at Lucas, then at his sketchbook, then back. "Sorry," he said quickly. "I wasn't bothering anyone, was I?" "No, not at all." Lucas crouched down slowly, careful not to spook him. "That's a really detailed drawing. Where did you see that house?" The boy tilted his head, like the question surprised him. "My mom drew it first, from memory. Said it was where her favorite uncle used to live before everything changed." Lucas felt the breath leave his body. "Your mom," he said slowly. "Does she remember whose house it was?" The boy shrugged. "She said it belonged to someone special. Someone she loved a long time ago. She told me to draw it so I'd remember too." Lucas swallowed hard, struggling to find steady footing beneath the earthquake rumbling beneath his ribs. "What's your name, kid?" he asked, voice softer now, edged with something fragile. "Noah," the boy answered. "Noah Jennings." Lucas's blood went cold. Jennings. That was her name, her last name. "Your mom," Lucas said carefully, like each word could detonate. "Her name, what is it?" Noah hesitated, then flipped the sketchbook shut and held it to his chest. Emma Jennings." The city noise seemed to vanish in that instant. Lucas could only hear his heartbeat, thundering against the cage of his ribs. Emma, his sister, the little girl who used to sleep in the bunk above him when they were both too young to understand what being abandoned meant. The girl who disappeared the year he got adopted, who never left a trace. He'd spent years telling himself she was a dream, a construct of a lonely child's imagination. But she was real, and now she had a son sitting on a sidewalk, drawing memories that should have been buried. Lucas stood, legs unsteady, a dozen questions spinning like broken ceiling fans in his head. He reached into his wallet, then paused. "Noah," he said again, voice raw with something too big to name. "Do you know where your mom is now?" The boy nodded. "She's sick, real sick, but she says not to worry, 'cause everything happens for a reason." He looked down. "I think the reason might be you." Lucas couldn't speak. All he could do was nod slowly, tears burning behind his eyes. And for the first time in years, Lucas Bennett, architect, billionaire, orphan, felt the past reaching back for him, demanding not just answers, but atonement. Lucas couldn't sleep that night. He stood in front of his bedroom window, the New York skyline gleaming like a lie, sharp, glittering, and cold. His penthouse was silent, the kind of silence people paid millions for, and yet Lucas had never felt more surrounded by noise. Every image from that afternoon spun in his head like a carousel on overdrive. Noah's face, the house in the drawing, the name Emma Jennings. He hadn't heard that name in 36 years. He remembered bits and pieces, flashes of brown curls, the sound of a little girl laughing from the bunk above his, a tiny hand that used to hold his when they were shuffled to yet another foster home. Emma had been his constant in a childhood full of shadows, until one day she was just gone. No explanation, no goodbye. Lucas had buried her with the rest of his past, too afraid to go digging through the wreckage. But now, the past had found him, in the form of a soft-spoken boy with charcoal-stained fingers and a sketchbook full of ghosts. The next morning, Lucas canceled his meetings. His assistant, Monica, protested gently. "Sir, the Osaka team flew in last night. They're expecting you at the 10 a.m. site review." "Reschedule it," Lucas said, his voice firmer than it had been in years. "All of it. Everything this week. Push it back." Monica didn't question him again. She'd seen the flicker of something in his eyes she couldn't quite name, something deeper than stress or strategy, something human. Lucas returned to the same corner by Columbus Circle, hoping lightning would strike twice. He waited for over an hour, pacing with nervous energy like a man trying to remember how to hope. Just as he was about to give up, he saw Noah again. Same spot, same cardboard mat, sketchbook in hand. The boy looked up as Lucas approached and offered a smile that seemed too calm for his age. "You came back," Noah said matter-of-factly, as if he'd expected him. "Yeah," Lucas replied, crouching beside him. "I needed to talk to you about your mom." Noah's smile dimmed slightly. "She doesn't like strangers asking questions." "I'm not a stranger," Lucas said quietly. "Not really." He reached into the inner pocket of his coat and pulled out an old, worn photograph, creased at the corners, faded with time. It was the only photo he had from before the Bennetts adopted him. 2 children, 1 boy, 1 girl, sitting on a porch step, eating popsicles. Noah leaned closer, squinting. "That's my mom," he whispered. Lucas nodded, throat tight. "And that's me." Noah blinked up at him, eyes wide. "You're the uncle she talked about, the one who drew the rainbow bridge." Lucas laughed softly, caught off guard. "She remembered that?" "She said you used to draw it on everything," Noah said with a quiet grin. "Even on the walls when you got in trouble. That sounds about right?" For a moment, they just sat in silence, 2 strangers linked by blood and memory. Then Lucas took a breath and asked the question that had haunted him all night. "Where is she now, Noah?" The boy hesitated, his fingers tracing the edge of the sketchbook. "She's at Mount Sinai, the hospital near the park." "What's wrong with her?" Lucas asked, though part of him was already afraid of the answer. "She's got something wrong with her lungs," Noah said softly. "They said it's stage 4. That means it's really bad, right?" Lucas couldn't speak. He just nodded. "They're giving her medicine," Noah continued, "but she gets tired a lot. She told me not to worry, but I can tell when she's hurting." Lucas reached over and gently placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You don't have to do this alone." Noah looked up at him, his expression caught somewhere between skepticism and longing. "Are you really her brother?" Lucas nodded again. "I didn't know where she went after the foster home. I thought she'd forgotten me." "She never did," Noah said quietly. "She said you were the only good part of that place." Lucas closed his eyes against the sting in them. "Can you take me to her?" Noah hesitated. "She might not want to see you." "Maybe not," Lucas said, "but I need to try." They walked the few blocks to Mount Sinai in silence, the wind colder today, as if it too carried the weight of something long overdue. The hospital smell hit Lucas hard, clean and sterile and unforgiving. They rode the elevator in silence to the 8th floor. Noah led the way through the oncology wing like he'd done it 100 times, and maybe he had. Outside a private room, he stopped. "She's sleeping sometimes," he warned. "She gets really tired after the treatments." Lucas nodded and took a deep breath. Inside, the woman on the bed looked small. Too small to be the memory Lucas carried of a scrappy, loud little girl who once dared him to climb the fence at the group home. Her skin was pale. An oxygen tube ran beneath her nose. But it was Emma, his Emma. He stepped inside slowly, the click of the door louder than he meant. She stirred, turned her head toward him. Her eyes fluttered open, cloudy and weak, but when they focused, they widened. Her lips moved before sound came. "Lucas?" He nodded, voice caught in his throat. "Yeah, Em, it's me." Tears welled in her eyes as she reached for his hand. I thought you'd forgotten." Lucas knelt beside her, clutching her hand in both of his. "Never," he said. "I just didn't know how to find you." The silence that followed was sacred. Outside the room, Noah sat in a waiting chair, sketchbook in his lap, drawing something new. A bridge, rainbow-colored, reaching across a page, and maybe, just maybe, across a lifetime. Lucas returned to the hospital every day after that. Each visit was different. Some days Emma was strong enough to sit up, to laugh a little, to sip soup Noah had insisted on reheating himself. Other days she barely opened her eyes, her strength a thread stretched too thin. But every day Lucas showed up. Never late, never rushed. He brought flowers, crossword puzzles, favorite childhood snacks they used to steal from the foster kitchen when no one was watching. Sometimes he just sat there and held her hand, silently apologizing for every year they'd lost. "You're really here," Emma murmured one afternoon, her voice raspy but steady. She squeezed his hand as if trying to make sure he was real. "I can't believe it." "I'm sorry. I wasn't sooner," Lucas whispered, guilt thick in his throat. Emma smiled gently. "You were a kid, too. We both were. We survived the best we could." He shook his head slowly. "You survived better than me." They both looked at Noah, who sat cross-legged on the windowsill, sketching something quietly. He'd been drawing non-stop since Lucas arrived. Bridges, buildings, faces, stars. Sometimes, when he thought no one was watching, he'd sketch Lucas and Emma together. Sometimes he'd draw Lucas alone, usually with a small hand tucked into his. "Does he know?" Lucas asked softly. Emma followed his gaze, her expression growing heavy. "Only what he needs to," she said. "I told him I had a brother once, that he was kind and strong and smart, that he could draw better than anyone, but I didn't want to put hope in a place it didn't belong." Lucas looked down at his hands. "He deserves the truth." Emma's eyes glistened. "He'll have it, but not yet. Let him know you first. Let him choose you, not because of blood, but because of heart." Lucas nodded slowly. It made sense. Everything Emma said had a quiet wisdom to it, the kind forged through years of doing everything the hard way. She had survived more than he could imagine. That night, Lucas drove back to his penthouse in a daze. His world, the world of glass towers and boardroom battles, suddenly felt so small, so irrelevant. He walked into his sleek, modern kitchen and opened the fridge. Fully stocked, high-end everything. He closed it again without touching a thing. Instead, he wandered to the guest room, the one he'd never used. It was pristine, spotless, lifeless. Lucas stood in the middle of the room, imagining it differently. A smaller bed, a desk with art supplies, a bookshelf with science fiction novels and sketch pads. Maybe glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. It hit him like a wave. He wanted that life. Not someday, now. The next morning, he returned to the hospital with a notebook and a pen. "I want to help," he told Emma the moment he stepped into her room. "Really help. Whatever you need, I'll do it." She smiled. "Good, because you're going to learn how to fold tiny clothes and find matching socks and tie little sneakers, and that's before breakfast." He chuckled, the sound caught halfway between joy and disbelief. "I don't even know where to start." Emma nodded toward the chair. "Start here. Just sit with him. Talk. Listen." That afternoon, Lucas took Noah for a walk around the hospital garden. The boy walked beside him with quiet comfort, still a little wary, but no longer hiding. "Your mom says you're good at drawing buildings," Lucas said, gently nudging the conversation. Noah shrugged modestly. "I like angles, lines, things that make sense." Lucas smiled. "I used to draw like that. Before everything else." "Why'd you stop?" The question caught Lucas off guard. "I guess I thought it didn't matter anymore," he admitted slowly. "Other things felt more important." Noah tilted his head, thinking. "Mom says you used to draw rainbows everywhere." Lucas laughed. "She told you that, huh?" "Yeah," Noah said, then glanced up shyly. "Do you still draw?" Lucas hesitated. Not in a long time. There was a pause. Then, softly, Noah said, "You should. Mom said when you drew, it felt like magic." Lucas swallowed hard. "Maybe I will." "Will you show me sometime?" Lucas stopped walking and turned to face him. "Yeah, buddy. I'd really like that." Noah beamed, the kind of smile that didn't just brighten his face. It lit something inside Lucas that had been dark for far too long. Later that night, as Lucas sat beside Emma's bed, she reached into a small box tucked in her drawer and pulled out a folded letter. Her hand trembled slightly. "I wrote this a year ago," she whispered, "when the doctors said I might not make it through the winter." Lucas unfolded the paper carefully. The handwriting was loopy and familiar. It read, "Dear Lucas, if you ever find this, if you're reading it now, then by some miracle you came back. I don't know where life took you, but I never stopped believing you were out there, doing something extraordinary. I want you to know that you have a nephew. His name is Noah. He's bright, sensitive, kind. So much like you were. If I'm not here anymore, promise me something. Don't let him grow up thinking he's alone. Let him see what family can be. He deserves that, and so do you. Love, Emma." Lucas pressed the letter to his chest. He didn't have to think about it. He would keep that promise. He already had. Lucas hadn't planned to stay overnight, but after reading Emma's letter, he couldn't bring himself to leave. The hospital lights dimmed by 10 p.m., leaving the corridors quiet and still. He sat beside her, watching her chest rise and fall with each strained breath, her frail body wrapped in two thin hospital linens that couldn't possibly hold all the weight of their history. He hadn't known what loss tasted like until he came face to face with its possibility, and now that it hovered so close, it terrified him. At some point during the night, Emma stirred. Her hand searched blindly across the sheets until it found his. "Still here?" she rasped. "Not going anywhere," he said softly, threading his fingers with hers. She smiled weakly. "You always hated hospitals." "I hated not knowing what happened to you more." Emma didn't reply. Instead, her eyes closed again, and Lucas remained, watching, remembering, promising. The next morning brought a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. He returned to the hospital with coffee, breakfast sandwiches, and a sketch pad tucked under his arm. When Noah opened the door to the hospital room and saw him standing there, he blinked in surprise. "You came back?" Lucas smiled gently. "Told you I would." Noah hesitated for only a second before stepping aside to let him in. As Emma slept, Lucas set the sketch pad on the windowsill and flipped to a blank page. "Want to draw?" he asked. Noah's eyes lit up. "What should we draw?" Lucas thought for a moment. Then he picked up a pencil. "How about a rainbow?" Noah tilted his head. "Like a real one?" "No," Lucas said, the corners of his mouth lifting. "One from memory." Together, they bent over the page, and for the first time in over 2 decades, Lucas let his hand move freely, lines flowing with an ease that surprised him. Noah watched his strokes, then added his own, softer, more whimsical, bursting with color and imagination. They didn't speak much as they drew, but they didn't need to. There was something sacred in the silence, something that passed between them with each shared pencil stroke. By the time Emma awoke, a rainbow arced across the page. One side drawn in tight architectural detail, the other blossoming with childlike charm. Emma's breath caught. "Is that?" Lucas smiled. "Your son's better than me?" She chuckled weakly. "He gets it from his uncle." Later that week, Lucas found himself in unfamiliar territory, standing in the children's section of a department store, bewildered by the sheer number of options for socks. "Noah's 9, he muttered to himself. "How hard can it be?" The sales associate, a cheerful woman named Candace, approached with a knowing smile. "First time?" He nodded sheepishly. "First everything," Candace chuckled. "Let me guess, single dad or new to parenting?" Lucas paused, unsure what to say. "Uncle, learning on the fly." She led him through rows of tiny t-shirts, miniature sneakers, and jackets with far too many zippers. As they moved through the aisles, Lucas remembered Emma's voice. "You're going to learn how to fold tiny clothes and tie little sneakers." He bought everything twice, just in case. As he stood in the checkout line, he caught his reflection in a mirrored column. Suit jacket gone, sleeves rolled, arms full of boy-sized hoodies and sketch pads. He looked like someone else. Maybe someone better. Back at the hospital, he laid the new clothes on the end of Emma's bed, watching as her face lit up at the sight of them. "You're spoiling him," she teased gently, though her eyes glistened with gratitude. Lucas shrugged. "Someone's got to catch up on 9 birthdays and a few Christmases." "Lucas." Emma's voice trembled. "He's going to need more than socks and pencils." He met her gaze. "I know. I'm trying." And he was. Every day, he showed up, learning how to braid hospital-grade IV cords into patterns with Noah, how to heat soup just the way Emma liked it, how to decipher her nods when words were too hard. And slowly, he learned something else too, how to be steady, how to be present, how to stay. One night, after Noah had gone home with a friend from school and Emma was dozing, Lucas sat in the room's quiet light and picked up the sketchpad again. He flipped through pages filled with their shared drawings. Castles, rockets, bridges, imaginary cities where magic and steel coexisted. In the center was their rainbow. As he stared at it, something in him shifted. All those years spent designing the tallest buildings, drawing endless blueprints for strangers, hadn't given him the satisfaction this rainbow did. It wasn't just color and lines. It was healing. Connection. Home. Emma stirred. Her voice was barely a whisper. "You still draw like hope." Lucas turned toward her, eyes wet. "And you still see it before anyone else?" She smiled faintly. "You're going to be amazing for him." Lucas squeezed her hand. "Because of you." And in that quiet, sacred moment, it became clear that the world wasn't built only by architects and engineers. Sometimes it was built by sisters who never gave up. And the brothers who came back. The hospital window had begun to fog with late afternoon light when Noah, quiet for nearly 20 minutes, suddenly looked up from his sketchbook and asked the question that stopped Lucas in his tracks. "Uncle Lucas," he said gently, as if testing the water, "Mom says you used to draw rainbows when you were little. Is that true?" Lucas blinked. His breath caught somewhere between his lungs and the truth. He glanced at Emma, who was asleep again, her breathing raspy but steady. Noah was watching him, those brown eyes full of innocent curiosity and something else too, a quiet hope that trembled at the edges. I used to draw all kinds of things," Lucas said slowly, his voice quiet. "But, yeah, I guess I did draw rainbows, especially after it rained. I thought they were magic." Noah nodded seriously, flipping his sketchbook closed and hugging it to his chest. "Mom said you always believed in stuff like that you drew colors even when things felt gray." Lucas's throat tightened. He hadn't thought about that in years. Back in the orphanage, crayons were currency, and rainbows were more than just hopeful. They were survival, a way to imagine something better. "I don't really draw anymore," he admitted, his voice strained. Noah looked puzzled. "Why not?" Lucas leaned back in the vinyl chair, his gaze drifting toward the ceiling tiles. "I think somewhere along the way, I started believing the world only wanted me to draw buildings that couldn't fall, not colors that made people feel." Noah didn't respond right away. Instead, he opened his sketchbook and tore out a page, carefully folding it in half. "Here," he said, holding it out. "I made this one for you. Maybe it'll help you remember." Lucas unfolded it slowly. It was a rainbow, but not just any rainbow. Each band of color was made up of smaller shapes, tiny bridges, houses, even people. And at the base of it all, two small stick figures stood beneath the arc, one tall, one small, hand in hand. The taller one had glasses like his, the smaller held a sketchbook. He felt the breath leave his body. "You're a better artist than I ever was," Lucas murmured, genuinely humbled. Noah beamed, then leaned over and whispered, "Maybe. You could draw again, for me. You know, when you're not busy being grown up." The simplicity of the request cut through years of distance and self-protection like a blade of light. "I think I can do that," Lucas said, his voice catching. That night, Lucas didn't leave the hospital. Emma had another coughing fit around midnight, and Lucas helped the nurse adjust her oxygen. He stood at her bedside afterward, unsure whether she could hear him, but needing to speak. "He asked about the rainbows," he said quietly. "Said you told him I used to draw them. I didn't even know you remembered that." Emma's eyelids fluttered, but didn't open. A single tear slipped down her cheek. Lucas reached out, gently brushing her hair back. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "For all the years you needed someone and I wasn't there. I'm here now, and I'm not leaving again." Her hand twitched slightly in response. The next morning, Lucas made two decisions. The first, he would start drawing again, not just for Noah, but for himself, to remember who he had been, and maybe who he still could be. The second, he would help Emma in any way he could, even if time was not on their side. He'd already arranged for a private pulmonologist to consult on her case, and he'd be meeting with a social worker that afternoon to better understand her benefits and what more he could do. But in the meantime, there was a boy waiting. Lucas took Noah home for a few hours that day, just to give him a break from the antiseptic smell of the hospital. They stopped by a bookstore first, where Lucas let him choose any sketch pad he wanted. Noah picked the biggest one they had. Back at Lucas's condo, a place that had once been sterile and quiet, Noah walked through the sleek rooms as if he were stepping into a museum. "It's clean," he said cautiously. Lucas laughed. "Too clean?" Noah nodded. "It doesn't smell like cookies or paint." "Well," Lucas said, crouching to Noah's level, "maybe we can fix that." He meant it too. That afternoon, they baked store-bought cookie dough, smudged paint on the windows from watercolors, and turned the balcony into an impromptu art studio. Lucas didn't take any calls that day, not even from the mayor's office, which had been trying to reach him about a contract for weeks. That night, as he tucked Noah into the guest bed, now piled with too many pillows and a stuffed lion they'd picked up at the store, Noah turned to him and asked, "Do you think Mom will be okay?" Lucas sat down at the edge of the bed, his heart heavy but honest. "I don't know, buddy, but I know we'll be okay, and I know we'll do everything we can to help her." Noah nodded slowly. Then, after a long pause, he whispered, "She says you're brave." Lucas blinked, his chest aching. "She says that?" "Yeah," Noah said, half asleep. "Says you used to believe in things, even when no one else did." Lucas watched him drift off, the soft sound of the city traffic muffled through double-paned windows. Maybe that's what this was about. Maybe rainbows weren't just for color after storms, but reminders of who we were before we forgot how to believe. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to draw them again. The night had settled soft and quiet over Lucas's condo, the city's chaos muted by the penthouse's insulated walls. Outside, headlights painted fleeting shadows against the glass, but inside, it was still. Noah was asleep in the guest room, one leg flung off the edge of the bed, his sketchbook tucked against his chest like a treasure. Lucas stood by the kitchen island, hands gripping the back of a chair. The dishwasher hummed in the background, the only sound besides his own uneven breathing. A dozen moments from the past few days played on a loop in his mind. Emma's pale face against a hospital pillow, Noah's tiny hand placing a daisy on the sketch pad, the way he'd asked about rainbows, as if Lucas still remembered how to believe in something beautiful for no reason at all. The ache in Lucas's chest hadn't gone away. If anything, it had deepened. He was still standing there, lost in thought, when Noah's voice broke the silence behind him. "Uncle Lucas?" It was barely a whisper. Lucas turned, startled to find the boy in his dinosaur pajamas, eyes wide and unsure. "Hey, buddy, you okay?" Noah nodded slowly, then padded barefoot across the hardwood floor. He climbed onto one of the stools, legs swinging, gaze fixed on the countertop. "I couldn't sleep." "Bad dream?" Lucas asked gently, coming around to sit beside him. Noah hesitated, then shook his head. "Not really. I just had a question." Lucas braced himself. Noah's questions were never small. "Ask me anything," he said, offering what he hoped was a reassuring smile. Noah took a deep breath, eyes flicking up to meet Lucas's. "Mom said when she was little you used to draw pictures of what you wanted your family to look like." Lucas felt the breath catch in his lungs. "She said, you used to draw a house with a big yard and a dog and a bunch of kids, all smiling." Noah's voice was barely above a whisper now. "Do you still draw that?" Lucas swallowed hard. He hadn't thought about those drawings in years. Crayon dreams on lined orphanage paper, taped to the walls of a room that smelled like powdered milk and Lysol. He used to draw that life so vividly it almost felt real, until life taught him that nothing was promised. "No," he said softly. "I stopped drawing that a long time ago." Noah nodded slowly. He didn't look hurt, just quiet. "Why?" Lucas exhaled, the weight of the truth almost too much. "Because I didn't think it could ever happen," he said, voice rough. "Because I thought maybe some people just don't get that kind of life." Noah was silent for a moment, processing. Then he reached into the pocket of his pajama pants and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He placed it on the counter without a word. Lucas unfolded it slowly. It was a sketch of the two of them. Lucas in a suit, looking surprised, and Noah beside him holding his hand. Behind them stood a woman with Emma's unmistakable features, and over all of it, a rainbow arched across the sky. Beneath the drawing, in uneven lettering, were 5 words. "We are your real family." Lucas didn't speak. Couldn't. Noah watched him quietly, then finally asked, "Do you think families can start over?" The words hit Lucas like a punch to the ribs. "I don't know," he said, his voice trembling, "but I'd like to try." Noah smiled faintly. "Then maybe you should draw that picture again, the one with the house, but this time make sure there's a room for me." Lucas reached across the counter and pulled the boy into a hug so tight it shook. Noah didn't resist. He melted into it like he'd been waiting for this moment his whole life. "I promise," Lucas whispered into his hair. "I'll never stop drawing it again." Later that night, after Noah was asleep once more, Lucas sat at his old drafting table, dust brushed off, pencils laid out in a neat row. For the first time in decades, he let his hand move across the page without an agenda. No floor plans, no renderings, just shapes and silhouettes, a small house, a garden, a big oak tree with a tire swing, a woman on a porch with a blanket over her knees, and next to her, a boy with a sketchbook. Beside him, a man who looked tired but happy. The drawing wasn't perfect. It was shaky in places. The proportions were off, but Lucas didn't care. He added one final detail, a rainbow, spanning wide and bold across the sky. Not because it made sense or because it was architecturally sound, but because it was the kind of beauty that meant something, that reminded him that hope didn't have to be logical to be real. And, in the quiet of the room, beneath the hum of the city and the steady ticking of the wall clock, Lucas Bennett smiled. Not the smile of a CEO, not the practiced grin of a man shaking hands at galas or sealing deals over five-star dinners. It was the smile of a man who had finally started to believe again, in second chances, in love found in unexpected places, and in the family waiting for him to pick up the pencil and draw. The morning after Lucas had redrawn his old dream, the city looked different to him, less sharp, less threatening. The skyline still towered, the traffic still roared, but something in him had softened. He wasn't walking into the world with the same armor anymore. He was carrying something more fragile now, something real. He glanced into the rearview mirror of the car he rarely drove himself and caught Noah asleep in the back seat, arms wrapped around that same sketchbook like a life vest. They were on their way to the hospital. It was time. When they walked into the room, Emma was propped up against a pile of thin pillows, her face paler than before but glowing with a kind of worn serenity. She smiled at the sight of them, her eyes instantly finding Noah's. "There's my favorite artist," she whispered, her voice raspy but full of love. "Mom," Noah breathed, racing forward to wrap his arms around her. "I brought him." Lucas stood just behind, uncertain. It wasn't the hospital walls or the machines that intimidated him, it was Emma. She looked both impossibly frail and impossibly strong. Time had etched lines into her face, but there was a light in her eyes he hadn't seen since they were kids. Emma held out her hand. "Lucas." He stepped forward slowly and took it, gently, afraid to break her. "Hey, Em." Her grip was surprisingly firm. "You came." "I should have come sooner," he said quietly. "I didn't know." "You know now," she replied simply. "That's what matters." There was a long silence, the kind that holds more weight than words ever could. Emma broke it with a sigh. "You look like him. Your father." Lucas blinked. "I don't remember him." "I do," she said softly. "You have his shoulders, his stubborn frown." Lucas managed a faint smile. "You got out. I always wondered if anyone from the home ever did." "I didn't go far," she said, "but far enough to start over. I got my GED, waitressed, studied floral design at night. I never had much, but I had enough." Lucas looked at Noah, who was now quietly sketching in the chair beside her. "You gave him everything." Emma's gaze dropped to her son. "I tried. He's the best thing I've ever done." Lucas swallowed hard. "I want to help now. Not just money. I want to be part of this. Of you two." Emma looked at him long and hard. "Why now?" "Because he drew a picture of a house I sketched once when I was a kid," Lucas said, voice thick. "Because he's yours. Because he's mine, too, in every way that matters." Emma nodded slowly. "It's not going to be easy." "I know. He asks a lot of questions," she warned, managing a small smile. "So do I," Lucas replied gently. Emma's breath caught, and her eyes welled with tears. "I used to wonder what kind of man you'd become. You were so angry when we were kids, so shut off, but I always knew you had a good heart." Lucas sat down beside her, his throat burning. "I buried it. Success was easier than feeling anything." "But you found it again," she said, eyes never leaving his. "Didn't you?" He didn't answer, but Emma saw the truth in his eyes. "I don't have much time, Lucas." "Don't say that. I need to," she whispered, "because there are things I need to set right." Lucas reached for her hand again. "We'll set them right together." A quiet knock interrupted them. A nurse poked her head in. "Ms. Bennett, time for your breathing treatment." Emma nodded and turned to Noah. "Go with your uncle for a bit, sweetheart. I'll see you after." Noah hesitated, eyes flicking between his mom and Lucas. "Promise?" "I promise," she said, brushing a hand down his cheek. Lucas guided Noah gently out into the hallway. They walked in silence for a bit, then found an empty bench near the atrium. "Is she going to be okay?" Noah asked, voice small. Lucas hesitated. "She's fighting really hard, buddy. Some days are better than others, but she's trying." Noah looked down at his sketchbook. "Sometimes I draw her better, so she remembers what that feels like." Lucas closed his eyes, overwhelmed. "That's beautiful, Noah." The boy nodded solemnly. "She told me you used to draw rainbows and houses. She said you always wanted a place where no one got left behind." "I did," Lucas admitted. "Still do." "Then maybe this is the start," Noah whispered. "Maybe this is the house." Lucas blinked rapidly and pulled Noah into his side, holding him tightly. That evening, Lucas returned to the hospital alone. Emma was awake, watching the news with the sound off. "I'm ready," she said before he could even sit down. "For what?" "To sign guardianship papers, in case I—" She swallowed. "Noah needs a parent." "I'm not a parent, Emma," Lucas said. "I'm still learning how to fold his laundry." "You're learning," she said with a tearful laugh. "That's enough." Lucas leaned forward. "Then I need you to teach me. As much as you can, while you still can." Emma reached for a pen and the paperwork beside her. "Then let's get to work." And, in the quiet flicker of that hospital room, a family began. Fragile, uncertain, but deeply rooted in love and the promise of more. The hospital hallway echoed with the quiet buzz of fluorescent lights as Lucas left Emma's room later that night, the freshly signed guardianship papers folded carefully in the inside pocket of his jacket. He walked with slow, deliberate steps, feeling the weight of the promise he now carried, a promise to a dying sister and a boy who called him uncle with unwavering trust. That word meant more than he could admit. By the time Lucas got home, Noah was already asleep on the pull-out couch in the den, sketchbook cradled against his chest like a talisman. Lucas watched him for a long moment from the doorway, his silhouette outlined in the soft glow of the nightlight Noah insisted on. A small, safe piece of light, just like the boy himself. Lucas eased into his desk chair across the room and reached for an old leather-bound journal he hadn't touched in years. It was dusty, the spine creaking as he opened it. Inside were sketches from another life, houses, bridges, spirals of impossible architecture, and near the back, half faded in colored pencil, was a rainbow. He remembered the night he'd drawn it, cold, rainy. He'd been 13, newly transferred to a group home that stank of bleach and hopelessness. A counselor had asked him what he'd want to see if he could see anything. Lucas had answered, "A way out." She'd handed him paper and told him to draw it. He had drawn a rainbow arching over a cottage. There was a tree swing, a fence, a front porch light left on. His eyes welled as he stared at it now. "You always wanted this," he whispered to himself, "and you walked right past it for years." Suddenly, a voice broke the silence. "Did you draw that?" Lucas turned. Noah stood barefoot in the doorway, sleepy-eyed and clutching his triceratops. Lucas cleared his throat, wiping his eyes subtly. "Yeah, a long time ago." "It looks like a real place," Noah said softly, stepping closer. "I wanted it to be," Lucas admitted. "I thought if I drew it enough times, maybe one day it'd show up." Noah studied the page, then looked up. "Do you still draw?" "Not in a long time." Noah hesitated, then climbed into the chair beside him. "Mom said you used to draw a rainbow that made her cry. Was this it?" Lucas swallowed. "Yeah, I think so." Noah picked up a colored pencil from the desk and traced part of the red arc gently. "Mom says rainbows mean hope. Do you think maybe we could draw it again? Together?" The request hit Lucas harder than he expected. He nodded slowly, his voice thick. "Yeah, buddy. Let's do that." They spent the next hour hunched over the old journal, resketching the rainbow together. Lucas guided Noah's small hand through the orange stripe while the boy filled in yellow and green with focused intensity. They added the house again, this time with 2 windows, a chimney, and a figure standing on the porch. Noah insisted on adding a second figure, holding the first one's hand. "Who's that?" Lucas asked gently. "That's you," Noah said simply. Lucas's heart clenched. "And that's me," Noah added, tapping the smaller figure, "because this is our house now." Lucas couldn't speak. He didn't need to. Eventually, the boy began to yawn. Lucas lifted him into his arms, blankets trailing behind, and carried him back to the pullout. As he tucked Noah in, the boy looked up at him. "Uncle Lucas?" "Yeah? Are you going to keep drawing with me?" Lucas smoothed the boy's hair back, his voice a rough whisper. "For the rest of my life." Noah smiled sleepily and turned onto his side, the sketchbook still within arm's reach. Lucas sat back down at the desk, unable to sleep. He opened a blank page in the journal and began to draw again. Not buildings or bridges this time, but a living room cluttered with crayons, a hospital bed surrounded by laughter, and a boy holding a rainbow like it was the only thing that could heal the world. The next morning, as sunlight broke across the windows and spilled into the small den, Lucas felt something he hadn't in decades. Belonging, not just to a legacy or a name or a skyline, but to a person. A small boy who asked him to draw, not because he needed perfection, but because he believed in the beauty of what they could create together. And, for the first time in his life, Lucas didn't just want to be brilliant. He wanted to be present, accountable, loving. He wanted to be someone a child could rely on to show up, not just for court hearings or check-ins or medical updates, but for every lost tooth, every scraped knee, every drawing of a lopsided son. He looked at the rainbow they'd finished the night before and whispered aloud, "This is the most important thing I've ever built." And deep down, he knew that was true. The following days brought a rhythm Lucas hadn't known he craved. Mornings began with peanut butter toast, the kind Noah insisted had to be cut diagonally, not straight. Afternoons were filled with gentle hospital visits and late evenings spent coloring or tinkering with model houses at the kitchen table. They were building something, beyond sketches and cardboard rooftops. They were building trust. But comfort doesn't last forever. The knock on Lucas's office door came just after lunch, interrupting a quiet moment where he'd been looking over a new design for the orphanage renovation. His assistant stepped in, hesitation on her face. "There's a man here asking for you," she said cautiously. "Name's Daniel Wright. Says he's family." Lucas frowned. "I don't know a Daniel Wright." He said it's about Noah. The name dropped like a stone in Lucas's gut. "Send him in." The man who entered wore a sleek gray suit and the smug confidence of someone who rarely heard the word no. He extended a hand Lucas didn't take. "Mr. Bennett, or should I say Mr. Montgomery, I'm Daniel Wright. I'm here on behalf of my mother, Judith Wright. She's your late sister's aunt-in-law, technically, her father's cousin's wife." Lucas stared at him, unblinking. "I'm listening." Daniel set down a thick envelope. "My mother has filed for emergency custody of Noah. She believes it's in his best interest to be raised by blood kin in a stable household with," he smiled coldly, "resources and structure." Lucas narrowed his eyes. Noah has that now. An orphaned child living in the care of a man he barely knows, no legal precedent of guardianship until a few days ago? Daniel clicked his tongue. "It's admirable that you stepped up, but the court may see it as sentimental, not strategic." Lucas's voice dropped to a quiet, dangerous register. "This isn't business. It's a little boy's life." "Exactly why it belongs in a courtroom," Daniel replied. "We'll see you there." The door clicked shut behind him. Lucas sat frozen for a full minute. Then he reached for his phone. "Call Margot," he told his assistant. "Family law attorney. I need her here now." By evening, Margot, sharp-witted, iron-spined, and loyal to a fault, was sitting in Lucas's kitchen, files spread across the table, beside half-finished coloring pages and a box of Legos. "They're filing under kinship priority," she explained, adjusting her glasses. "New York courts lean heavily in favor of blood relatives if the child's placement isn't clearly secured." "But I am blood," Lucas replied, voice taut. "He's my nephew." Margot sighed. "Without proof, you're just a good man who showed up late. We need DNA confirmation, and fast." Lucas rubbed a hand down his face. "What if that's not enough? Then we show the judge who's been here, who's held that child's hand through hospital waiting rooms, who's folding his socks and tucking in bedtime stories. We prove Noah's heart belongs with you." The next day, Lucas and Noah were at the clinic. Noah didn't cry during the cheek swab, just asked if it would help his mom get better. Lucas's answer was quiet. "It'll help keep us together, buddy." The court date loomed like thunder on the calendar. Lucas sat beside Noah on Emma's hospital bed the night before, tracing the boy's hair gently as he read aloud. Emma, gaunt and pale but smiling, watched them with tender eyes. "Lucas," she whispered after Noah drifted off, "if anything happens tomorrow, it won't. Just—" She reached for a folded letter beside her. "Give this to the judge if you have to." He nodded, tucking it into his coat pocket without looking. He didn't need to read it to know it came from love. The courtroom was cold, formal, unforgiving. Lucas stood in a suit that suddenly felt too tight. Across the aisle sat Judith Wright, a polished woman with pearl earrings and thinly veiled disinterest, her son Daniel whispering to her between every statement. They painted a picture of affluence, of inheritance, of propriety. But Lucas's side had heart. Margot introduced hospital records, photos of Noah's artwork pinned proudly on Lucas's fridge, testimonials from Emma's doctors, even statements from the orphanage board about his commitment to children's welfare. Finally, the judge looked at Lucas. "Do you have anything else?" Lucas stepped forward, slowly, deliberately. He unfolded Emma's letter. "Your Honor," he began, voice trembling but clear, "this is from my sister, the woman who raised that boy through every heartbreak. It's her voice that should be heard." He read aloud, "To whom it may concern. If I don't make it, let the court know this. Lucas is the man I always prayed my son would grow up knowing. He is family, not just by blood, but by soul. Noah deserves someone who sees him, who listens to him, who draws rainbows with him when the world feels gray. That someone is my brother. Please don't take that away from him." The courtroom fell still. Even Daniel looked away. The judge's ruling came an hour later. Lucas would retain custody. Outside the courthouse, Lucas knelt in front of Noah, who clutched his triceratops tightly. "Does this mean we're staying?" the boy asked hesitantly. Lucas's eyes brimmed. "It means we're just getting started." And in that moment, under the gray New York sky, a new kind of family began, built not from obligation or law, but from the quiet, powerful promise to never let go again. The days following the custody hearing felt like coming up for air after nearly drowning. The tension that had coiled in Lucas's chest for weeks finally began to unwind. Yet, peace didn't arrive in a grand flourish. It came in the small, quiet moments. A hand held during bedtime, a laugh shared over spilled juice, a whispered "thank you" from a little boy who was slowly beginning to believe this life might actually last. Lucas moved Noah's things into the guest room that weekend, transforming the sterile, mostly unused space into something soft and boyish. The architecture sketches and blueprints that once dominated his penthouse walls were temporarily tucked away, replaced by crayon drawings and alphabet magnets. The scent of sawdust and coffee was replaced with hints of peanut butter and shampoo. He was learning new blueprints now, ones that came without measurements or calculations. How to braid a jump rope, how to soothe a nightmare, how to say, "I'm here," without needing words at all. One morning, Lucas was tying Noah's shoes, still fumbling slightly with the double knot, when the boy looked up and asked, "Are you still a CEO?" Lucas chuckled. "Technically, yes. Why?" Noah shrugged. "You don't wear suits anymore. You wear dad clothes." Lucas blinked, then laughed. "Do you like dad clothes?" Noah nodded seriously. "They have hugs in them." That simple sentence lingered with Lucas all day. At the office, things were shifting too. Lucas had started pulling back, delegating more, handing over daily responsibilities to his executive team. It felt strange at first, like leaving his hand off the wheel of a ship he'd built from scratch. But it also felt right. He'd seen too many boardrooms and not enough birthdays. That was going to change. It was during a quiet dinner at the apartment, with Noah eating spaghetti and humming off key, that Lucas said the words out loud for the first time. "I'm stepping down." Margot, who had come over for legal paperwork and stayed for lasagna, looked up sharply. "You're serious?" Lucas nodded. "I've been chasing buildings, but I think it's time to build something else. Something for kids like Noah, like me." Margot leaned back in her chair, surprised. "What are you thinking?" Lucas's voice deepened, steady with purpose. "An academy. For foster youth. Kids in group homes, shelters, the system. A place that teaches more than textbooks. A place that gives them tools to dream and create." He glanced at Noah, who had spaghetti sauce on his cheek and a sparkle in his eye as he drew stick figures beside his plate. "I want to show them what's possible when someone finally says, 'I believe in you.'" Margot exhaled slowly. "That's bold and beautiful." "It's necessary," Lucas replied, his voice soft but firm. "And it's overdue." By the following week, the plan was already in motion. Lucas met with former colleagues, architects, educators. He called in favors and rallied allies. Word spread quickly that Lucas Bennett, once the fiercest man in Manhattan's skyline wars, was now pouring his energy into something far more personal. Some were skeptical, others inspired, but none could deny that the fire behind his eyes had shifted. It no longer burned for profit. It burned for purpose. One rainy Tuesday, Lucas visited the orphanage where he'd spent his early childhood. The walls were still beige, the halls still echoed with distant laughter and unresolved ache. He met with Ms. Ruiz, the director, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a spine of steel. "You remember this place?" she asked gently. Lucas nodded, running a hand along the chipped paint of the hallway. "Every corner," he murmured. "This was the first place I ever drew. The first place I ever felt invisible, too." Miss Ruiz nodded, understanding more than he said. "I want to change that," Lucas added. "Not just for one kid, for hundreds." She smiled, tears brimming. "Then let's do it." Back home, Lucas told Noah the news in the simplest way he could. "I'm starting a school, buddy, for kids like you, kids who need a place to feel safe and seen." Noah's eyes widened. "Will I go there?" "You can," Lucas said warmly. "But more importantly, you'll help me build it." That night, they stayed up late with construction paper and markers, sketching ideas. Noah wanted bright walls, a treehouse in the library, cookies on Fridays. Lucas wanted teachers who listened, rooms with sunlight, and the chance to rewrite childhoods with kindness and dignity. Later, as Noah drifted off to sleep, Lucas sat beside him, brushing back his hair. "You're brave," he whispered, "braver than anyone I know." Noah stirred slightly but didn't wake. In the stillness, Lucas felt something anchor deep inside him, not the weight of responsibility, but the steady peace of knowing he was finally exactly where he was supposed to be. He had built towers, he had conquered markets. But now, finally, he was building something that would outlast him. A family, and soon, a legacy. The morning sun filtered through gauzy curtains, casting soft gold onto Lucas's kitchen counter where a single envelope sat, unopened, but already heavy with meaning. Margot had dropped it off the night before, placing it in his hands with a reverence that made his throat tighten. She wrote it 3 weeks before she passed, Margot had said quietly, but never got the chance to send it. Now, Lucas sat at the kitchen table, Noah still asleep in the next room, the hum of the city muted beyond the walls. His fingers hesitated over the paper, heart pounding in a way that not even boardroom battles had ever managed. He opened it slowly. The handwriting was unmistakably Emma's. Neat, graceful, with soft curls at the ends of letters. It transported him immediately to a past he'd buried in ambition and denial. Dear Lucas, if you're reading this, then I suppose life played out the way I feared and hoped all at once. Feared because it meant I wouldn't get to see you again. Hoped because I wanted you to know. Noah is yours. Ours. I never lied about that, even when you doubted me. And though I wish we'd had more time, for explanations, for forgiveness, I don't want you to carry guilt. We all make choices. I made mine, you made yours, and now, if you choose, you have the chance to make another. Lucas blinked back tears, breath shaky. Noah is everything good I've ever done. He's got your eyes, but more importantly, your fire. He dreams big and loves quietly and questions everything. I hope he teaches you how to slow down. I hope you teach him how to believe. If you're reading this, it's because Margot trusted you to be the man I always knew lived beneath the CEO. Don't just care for him. Know him. Don't just provide. Be present. Let him draw on your blueprints and teach you how to color outside the lines. You once told me architecture was about building something that lasts. I hope this, our son, his future, is the greatest thing you ever build. With love, always, Emma. The letter fell from his hands onto the table, and Lucas dropped his head into his palms, weeping silently. Not out of grief, but because of the overwhelming weight of grace. Even in death, Emma had left him hope, direction, a path. That evening, as twilight turned the sky lavender, Lucas and Noah stood side by side in the nearly empty shell of a building, the future site of the Bennett Academy for Design and Discovery. They had agreed on the name together. Noah had insisted it should honor both their last names. She said I could be both. Noah had shrugged, wise beyond his years. So I want both. Now, they looked out over beams and echoing floors, a space filled not with desks or doors yet, but with dreams. The contractors were due in the next day. The classrooms would take shape within weeks, but already the vision was alive. "Where's the art room going to be?" Noah asked, his small hand wrapped around Lucas's larger one. Lucas pointed to the far corner. "Big windows, natural light, easels lined up like soldiers. We'll put a mural on the outside wall, your idea. And the garden?" Noah's eyes sparkled. "Out front, where everyone can see it when they walk by. Flowers and herbs. You can design the layout." Noah grinned. "Mom loved lavender. We should plant a lot." Lucas nodded, throat tight again. "We will." Later, over grilled cheese and tomato soup, Noah asked the question Lucas had sensed brewing for weeks. "Do you miss my mom?" Lucas looked at the boy, the mirror of the woman he had once loved and foolishly lost. "Every single day. Even though you didn't believe her?" "Yes," Lucas admitted, voice low. "Even more, because I didn't." Noah stared into his soup for a long moment. Then he asked, "Do you think she'd be proud of us?" Lucas didn't hesitate. I know she would. She'd be proud of how strong you are, of how kind, and I think she'd be proud of me too, for finally learning what matters. The next morning, Noah carefully pinned Emma's letter to a bulletin board in the new academy's entrance hall. It was the only thing on the wall for now. When Margot visited later that week, she found them both barefoot, painting trim with wide, messy strokes. Lucas had green smudges on his cheek, and Noah was laughing, freely, joyfully. Margot stood in the doorway, quietly overwhelmed. "You really did it," she whispered. Lucas smiled. "Not alone." And he meant it. This wasn't just a project. It wasn't just redemption. It was family, and it was the beginning of something extraordinary. Late spring sunshine warmed the red brick facade of the Bennett Academy for Design and Discovery. The building, once empty and echoing, now thrummed with color, energy, and the sound of children's laughter. Classrooms had sprouted like ideas, each one uniquely crafted to inspire, from the light-flooded art studio to the cozy reading nooks built with reclaimed wood and filled with Emma's favorite books. In one of those classrooms, just beneath a wide window painted with rainbows, Noah stood on a small wooden stool, carefully pinning up a drawing. His hands moved with a reverence far beyond his years. It was a picture he had been working on for weeks. Crayon strokes, tender and bold, revealed 3 smiling figures: a woman with flowing hair, a man in glasses holding a rolled blueprint, and a little boy in between, holding both their hands. Above them, in shaky but determined handwriting, the title read, "Me, Mom, and the Man Who Stayed." Lucas stepped into the doorway and paused. For all the success he'd ever known, contracts signed, awards received, skylines altered, nothing had ever leveled him like this small, quiet moment. He watched his nephew, his son, step down from the stool and gaze at the drawing with a satisfied sigh. "That's us," Noah said, not turning around. "I mean, not just me and Mom. I added you." Lucas moved slowly into the room, dropping to a knee beside the boy. "It's beautiful." "I wasn't sure at first," Noah admitted. "I didn't know if it was okay to put you in." Lucas placed a hand over Noah's. "You never need permission to include someone you love." The boy looked up at him, searching his face. "Even if it's not perfect?" Lucas smiled gently, especially then. Outside, the grand opening ceremony was already underway. Parents, city officials, former students from Lucas's mentorship programs, all were gathered under white canopies strung with lights. But in here, in the heartbeat of it all, the real ceremony was unfolding. "Want to come see the mural?" Noah asked, already bounding toward the hallway. Lucas followed, heart swelling. At the main entrance, a mural covered the entire outer wall, designed by the Academy's first group of students, painted with help from artists and architects who volunteered their time. It was a depiction of growth in every sense: roots breaking through concrete, buildings shaped like open hands, flowers blooming into paper cranes, and children holding tools, brushes, rulers, pencils, and at the very center, a girl with a lavender in her hair and strength in her eyes. Emma. Lucas stood silently, overcome. The rendering of her was perfect, not because it was flawless, but because it was alive. The mural didn't just honor her, it breathed her. "She belongs here," Noah said softly, standing beside him. Lucas nodded. "So do you." The boy smiled. "So do you." Later that evening, after the speeches and handshakes and applause had faded, Lucas and Noah walked through the nearly silent halls of the school, checking light switches and straightening a crooked chair here or there. It was a ritual they'd already started, closing the building down together each night. In the entryway, near the same corkboard where Emma's letter still hung, a small wooden plaque had been installed. It read, "Family is not just who we are born to, it's who stays, who shows up, who builds with us. This place is for every child who ever needed that kind of love." Beneath it, in loving memory of Emma Grace Bennett. Lucas stared at the plaque, his fingers brushing its edge. He still missed her. He always would. But now, her voice wasn't a whisper in his regrets. It was the anthem guiding his purpose. Noah stood next to him, holding a folded piece of paper. "I wrote something," he said, hesitating. "Wanna hear it?" Lucas crouched beside him again, like always. More than anything, the boy unfolded the page, took a breath, and began. "Sometimes, love looks like a drawing, or a soup bowl, or someone who shows up and stays even when it's hard. I thought families had to be perfect. Now I think families just have to be real. I didn't have a dad for a long time, but now I do, and he lets me draw on blueprints and eat cereal for dinner sometimes, and he laughs, weird, and he listens when I'm scared. And that's what makes this home, a place where you don't have to ask permission to be loved." Lucas didn't respond right away. He couldn't. His eyes were glassy, his chest full. "Did you show that to your teacher?" he asked softly. Noah shook his head. "It was just for you." Lucas pulled him into a tight hug, holding him like something sacred. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for letting me be your home." Outside, the last of the city's daylight faded into warm twilight. Inside, under soft school lights, a boy and his uncle, now father in every way that mattered, stood surrounded by blueprints and crayons and the infinite promise of second chances. And, in that space, built not from bricks or steel, but from loss and love and healing, they knew the truth. Family isn't where you come from. Family is where you're welcomed. Family is who stays.